Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Sarvabhutastam Atmanam. Sarvabhutam Chadatmani. Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma. Savatra Samadarshanaha. Sarvabhutastam, situated in all beings. Atmanam, the supersoul. Sarva, all. Bhutani, entities. Cha, also. Atmani, in the self. Ikshate, does see. Yoga Yukta Atma, one who is dovetailed in Krishna consciousness. Savartra, everywhere. Samadarshanaha, seen equally. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Please repeat. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Purport. A Krishna-conscious yogi is the perfect seer because he sees Krishna, the Supreme, situated in everyone's heart as Supersoul, Paramatma. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridesha Arjuna Tishtati. The Lord in his Paramatma feature is situated within both the heart of the dog and that of a Brahmana. The perfect yogi knows that the Lord is normally transcendental and is not materially affected by his presence in either a dog or a Brahmana. That is the supreme neutrality of the Lord. The individual soul is also situated in the individual heart, but he is not present in all hearts. That is the distinction between the individual soul and the supersoul. One who is not factually in the practice of yoga cannot see so clearly. A Krishna-conscious person can see Krishna in the heart of both the believer and the non-believer. In the Smriti, this is confirmed as the follows. Atatavak cha matrit vach cha atmahi paramo hari. The Lord, being the source of all beings, is like the mother and the maintainer. As the mother is neutral to all different kinds of children, the Supreme Father, our mother, is also. Consequently, the Supersoul is always in every living being. Outwardly also, every living being is situated in the energy of the Lord, as will be explained in the 7th chapter. The Lord has primarily two energies. The spiritual are superior and the material are inferior. The living entity, although part of the superior energy, is conditioned by the inferior energy. The living entity is always in the Lord's energy. Every living entity is situated in Him in one way or another. The yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations, according to the results of fruitive work, in all circumstances, remain the servants of God. While in the material energy, the living entity serves the material senses. And while in the spiritual energy, he serves the Supreme Lord directly. In either case, the living entity is the servant of God. This vision is equal equality, this vision, of equality is perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. What time are we supposed to finish?
6.
6. Okay. So the verse again, a true yogi observes me and all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the Supreme Lord, everywhere. So think for a moment, if you see a ship out at sea, we've all seen a ship out at sea, maybe a mile off the shore. Or you see an airplane flying in the sky, a couple of miles up. Or even you see a rickshaw. What is the first thing that you think about?
It must be a driver.
You're very, very good. Because generally when I see the airplane, I think airplane. And when I see a boat, first I just think the boat. And when I see the rickshaw, I think the rickshaw. So thank you for the advanced vision. Because when we look at the airplane, we know the airplane is up there floating in the sky. And we know the boat is floating on the water and the rickshaw is moving. Yet we have to take time to think that there's a driver inside the vehicle. So here Krishna is bringing Arjuna gradually, step by step, through the culmination of Yoga Darshana. For those of us who have Gitas, and if we have a microphone, Mother Pravarti has asked that we speak to the microphone. But Krishna starts out talking to Arjuna about practicing yoga. And does anyone know where first Krishna mentions the concept of yoga in the Bhagavad-Gita? Is there a microphone? Okay, someone go to chapter 2, verse 39. Would someone like to read that verse out loud? $2.39. You have a Gita? You have a Gita? You want a Gita? Why not? Okay. You have to read loud? What page are you on? What page do you have?
Hare Krishna. Eshate abheta samthe buddhi yoge tu ima sranu buddhiya yukto yadha partha karma bandhan prahasya.
What page is it? Huh? 111. Okay. 111. Okay. In English, what does he say? Okay.
Read the English.
You want to read the English, please? 239. You read the English. What? Yeah, 239. Chapter 2, verse 39.
122 or 111?
Yes. Read the English.
Thus, for I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works.
Okay. So here Krishna first starts talking about yoga. You see, he mentions here buddhi yoga tvam imam shrinu. That I've explained to you. First of all, he explains about the vehicle. that we're situated in the body, but the driver within the body is not like the body. The body is the flesh vehicle, but the driver of the body is not made of flesh. The driver of the body is made of spirit. The flesh vehicle disintegrates, is temporary, is here today, and in a few days it's gone away. It's here for a year, and in a few years it goes away. But the spirit which is embedded within the body, Krishna is convincing Arjuna, first of all, that that spirit is eternal. Now the whole scenario is set up for us to understand the process of self-realization. And if we look back at the very beginning of the introduction to the Gita, Arjuna is confused and bewildered. So in his bewilderment and confusion, what does Arjuna do?
He asks Krishna what's going on.
Pardon?
He asks Krishna what's going on.
Before he does that, what does he do?
He surrenders.
Before that? Before that? The scene. How is the scene set? What is the first thing?
He asks Krishna to put in between the two artists.
He asked Krishna to let me see what's going on. So it's showing us that our first priority is that we have to ask the Lord to give us enlightenment of the circumstance. We have to be able to look and see what the conditions are that we're dealing with. If we just go on blindly in the condition, then our situation will perpetuate itself. But eventually, you see, Arjuna, he became so overwhelmed with the circumstance of events that he asked Krishna, oh, just take me in the midst of this. Now you see that required a lot of courage. Of course, Arjuna was a warrior, but still, it requires courage on our behalf to ask God to take us and show us what we have to deal with. A lot of times we want to avoid this preliminary process, but it does require some conscious surrender on our initial surrender on our part to show God that we're willing now to make the effort to enter into the process of understanding. So now Krishna has taken Arjuna in the middle, and he's described in the first chapter what's taking place. Now he begins to explain to Arjuna what his qualification is for entering into deeper understanding. So that first qualification is to understand that there's a driver to the car, and that driver is different than the car itself. Now, just like we look at the airplane in the sky, we understand there's a pilot. So that pilot, that is actually Bhagavan. Then the pilot has a co-pilot. And the co-pilot is? Huh? Pardon? No.
Spiritual master.
The guru is the co-pilot. The guru is the co-pilot. Just think about the analogy. Krishna is driving, but the guru is there sitting along with Krishna. And the jiva is the passenger. The jiva has nothing to do with what's going on. In illusion, the jiva is thinking that I am the driver. And he's thinking I'm not only the passenger, but not only am I the pilot, but I'm the co-pilot too. I am God and I am Guru. So I don't need anybody else. I'm just driving this boat, or this car all by myself. So that is the first mistake that it is it is necessary for us to come and realize that we are simply the passenger. And of course, inside the airplane, you know, not only do you have the pilot, you have the co-pilot, but you have the chief steward, and you have all the helpers. So those are the symbols of devotees and saints and sages that are helping in this journey along the way. Ultimately, all the passenger does is pretty much gets the ticket. And by desire, the passenger says, I want to go from New York to Mumbai, from Mumbai to Kathmandu. But a qualified agent has to drive the vehicle. And that qualified agent is Krishna. So Krishna explains that we're all situated in this vehicle made of material energy. And Lord Brahma gives us some idea of what this vehicle is like. In the prayers we were just reading last week, the prayers by the demigods to the Lord for protection, Lord Brahma explains, that the living entity is situated on this chakra, which is like it's a wheel, like a yantra. And in the center of this yantra is the Paramatma, or the super soul. Now, if you look at this, you can kind of visualize, if you look at it from, let's say, a vertical plane, right below the hub would be a triangle. And on each angle of the triangle, you have the three modes of material nature. And from each line of the triangle, each side plane of the triangle, you have 5 spokes that are coming out. So these 5 spokes, they represent the 5 senses and the 5 life airs. Then around the rim of these spokes coming out of the triangle, you have ego, ahankara, then you have what is called ether, then you have what is called, what's the next? Intelligence, mind, what do you have? How does it go? Earth, yes. Well, you have the air, fire, water, and the earth. So these elements. So this is how the vehicle that we're situated in is composed and created. And this vehicle is moving just like is described, Lord Brahma, just like lightning. And it's all being directed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we look at this vehicle, the body, and we see how much of a conscious control really do we have of our body. All of us are sitting here. But how did you get in that position, particular position?
Just I became uncomfortable. My wrist slack, and I decided to make it straight.
You decided. And your decision was your desire, but the execution, the action of that was actually done by a whole network of levies and pulls and nerves and impulses, you know, nerves, muscles, joints, etc. like that, which is all being directed unconsciously by you. So that direction is, that unconscious activity that's taking place is the power, it's a mysterious power that we are most of the time unaware of. We're only aware of a small portion of our existence. And the major portion in the body, we have no idea how it's happening, how the eye is blinking, how the eye is looking at an object, perceiving, bringing it back through what is called the optic nerve, taking it to the back of the brain, make it into an image, and we see it as a person in front of us. Or how you're hearing my voice through the inner ear, and the wave is going to the brain, and you're hearing what is called an intelligent sound, which you're interpreting some meaning to. How all of that is taking place, we don't have a clue. So there's a master engineer that is not a one-time stationary controller, but is continually, through every minute of every second, directing all of our behavior. Yet we are thinking that we are the controller because we have some power over a minute fraction of our consciousness. Therefore, we're called Ishwara because of that small controlling power. But that supreme controller, that's called the Paramishwara. Paramishwara. And that Paramishwara is the same controlling principle that is within all of us. It doesn't matter who we are, where we are. Not only within us, but that same principle is within all creatures. That same principle is within even non-moving entities, plants, trees, then the moving entities like the aquatics, then the beast, and finally within us human beings. There's an all-pervading energy which is within all of us. And within our self as human beings, that entity is called the Sarvamitra, or the best friend. That is our best friend. Yet, because our vision is so far extended outward, we are not generally able to tune into this connection that we have with our friend. It's like you may have someone who's your very, very dear friend. Yet, due to certain activities, you might ignore that friend or abuse the friend and not be aware of the friend's well wishes or presence in your environment. Okay. So that's how we are with Bhagavan, who is situated as the Paramatma within us. And the unique specialty of human life is that we are the only beings practically that can realize this fact. The creation is very, very vast, and there are all different types of living entities. Basically, they're divided into basically two categories, moving and non-moving. Okay. And amongst the moving living entities, we human beings are considered to be in a very, very good position because we have the developed intellectual capacity to understand that we have a relationship with something which is beyond our immediate awareness. And the goal of human life is to engage in the process of cultivating this relationship. And as we begin to cultivate the relationship, back to the initial start of the conversation when I was saying that Krishna first establishes the point to Arjuna that you're not the body, you're spirit, soul. And then as you advance through the understanding, you start to practice what is called yoga. Now really Krishna, even though this chapter, we emphasize it as a chapter of yoga, Krishna started talking about yoga all the way up to this point, and he really talks about yoga in detail in the previous chapter. He talks about the processes of, what are the processes of yoga? And specifically, different kinds of yoga, and he talks about the controlling the pranayama, the breath control, and things like that. And he outlines this process of yoga more in depth. Now here he kind of gives an overview, because all the time Krishna is explaining that the qualifications of engaging in yoga is that It is an inward job. As Krishna is convincing Arjuna from the beginning of the second chapter, he's talking about that if you want to come to this understanding this entity that's first of all inside of who you are, then you have to direct the consciousness within into what is called the spiritual kingdom. As long as the consciousness is directed outward towards the material kingdom, there's no possibility. So the consciousness is directed outward into the material kingdom through these spokes that are on the triangle, the three modes of material nature. So Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to withdraw the senses and then direct them inward towards the Paramatma, or the Supreme Soul. So this is the whole process of yoga that Krishna is leading up to, ultimately to the final point where Krishna says that you will see ultimately the Supreme Soul within inside of yourself. But he gives stages along the way of progress of a person. So first of all, is to enter into what is called the vision of the spirit, or Brahman. That one has to develop the Brahman vision, where one sees the spirit everywhere. Then Krishna says one who does this, first of all, that the first qualification is that he starts to look at material objects, whether a pebble, stone, gold, he starts to see them equally. He sees that they're basically just a combination of the material elements. And there's no differentiation on the elemental level of these ingredients. Then after that, a little higher, Krishna says that one who goes a little higher, what does Krishna say that person's vision is? Does anybody remember? Now before that, he says that one will then see, yes, he actually says that, but not only persons, but all entities. A cow, an elephant, a dog, a Brahmin, a dog eater. Then he sees them all equally. Then after that, Krishna says, as one advances even further in the spirit, working the way back up to seeing the Paramatma, then Krishna says one sees, anybody remember?
Sees me and all beings?
Almost, not yet.
Oh,
Not yet. Krishna is explaining to us what is called becoming an Uttama Adhikari. These first stages are called Kanishta Adhikari. When verse 1 enters into the practice of spiritual life, one starts to see matter is insignificant and sees everything pretty much the same. That is spiritual first stage, Kanishta Adhikari. Then the second stage, Krishna explains to Arjuna that one then starts to see one's enemies, one's friends, one's well-wishers with an equal heart, equal vision. So this is a process of progress that Krishna is giving us to ultimately come to a point where we see the Supreme Self inside of ourselves. At this point, Krishna says that having this vision where one sees one's enemies, friends, well-wishers, all equally, one sees Krishna within them all and sees that they're all situated in the Supreme Lord. What do you think so far about these ideas? Yes.
I just add that on the third stage, probably.
He's going to give you a microphone.
Then on the third stage, also a person he sees everyone as a servant of the Lord. Everyone as das and das.
That's a very, very good observation, because at the very end of the purport, you have the Bhagavad-Gita? Okay. You see the very end of the purport there. Since you made this contribution, could you read the very last paragraph? So let's turn to the very last paragraph, page 299. You got it? Or you can just take
The last one.
last paragraph.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations, according to the results of fruitive work, in all circumstances, remain the servants of God. While in the material energy, the living entity serves the material senses, and while in the spiritual energy, he serves the Supreme Lord directly. In either case, the living entity is the servant of God. This vision of equality is perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness.
So can you repeat your original statement again? Because you've actually said.
Yeah, the third stage, when a person on the third stage, he sees everyone as a servant of the Lord.
Everyone is a servant of the Lord. No matter what their position is, he sees them as the servant of the Lord and in the Lord's energy, regardless. Anyone like to comment upon, what's your name? Abhadika Banu's statement here. Anyone like to expand it? That's a very, very important point she made, and it's actually right out of the purport. Very, very beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
It's a simple thing. The difference between material life and spiritual life is, am I serving the senses or am I serving Krishna? And that's why a few verses back, when we get this in mind, where Krishna said, wherever the mind wanders, one should pull it back. Wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one should pull it back under the control of the self. So we have to be aware. Am I serving Krishna? Is it under control of self, or am I serving senses? If we're not careful, like you said, we just sort of do whatever comes in front of us.
Would anyone like to expand on Prabhu's statement here? It's a very, very important point, because up until this point, actually, Krishna has been encouraging Arjuna all the time about making the distinction between sense gratification and spiritual gratification. This is the trial that brings glory. This is the process of sacrifice and suffering that the living entity in the initial state is going through to direct his or her mind back towards the Lord. Because we are so conditioned throughout not just this life, but perpetually many, many hundreds of thousands of lifetimes to be controlled by the senses. And it's just, we don't know any difference. We have no other information. And that's why Krishna says, one place to Arjuna, that this is Raja Vidya, this is the king of all knowledge. Because it's the knowledge about you and I. It's the knowledge about ourselves. So the knowledge about ourselves, Krishna says, is the king of all knowledge. It's much superior to geometry, engineering, business, management, art, poetry. The knowledge of the self is the topmost of all knowledge. So Krishna is constantly encouraging Krishna in every chapter, from chapter 2 up until this point, all the way to the very end, about this process that we have to engage in. And it's a process, It's a trial that we all have to go through of suffering. Because initially we are thinking that my whole business here is to enjoy the material world. And then when we give up the material, we think, oh, this is a great suffering. So this suffering actually brings glory eventually to us, because it leads us back to our glorified body or our spiritual body. Hare Krishna.
So in the beginning, you gave the example of the aeroplane, boats, and
Rickshaw on the boat.
so just like you said, the aeroplane, we understand that pilot is there, and then co-pilot is there, and we are just like a passengers. So now, what is the role of the passengers where the pilot is taking? So wherever the pilot takes, the passenger is agree with him. Okay, wherever you take me, I am ready with you.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, suppose I am a thief, I have a tendency to steal.
Mm-hmm.
So now, how do you apply those pilot and guru and passenger to this one?
The pilot's job is just simply to take the passenger where the passenger wants to go. Just like you heard the story about our god brother, Haridas in Mumbai. You know Haridas. You're from Mumbai. Yeah. I was there when Haridas was a professional pickpocket thief. Professional. And he actually came to Prabhupada's room with the idea of he's going to steal that Rolex watch that Prabhupada was wearing. So after some time, Prabhupada just said, "Oh, you want this watch?" And gave it to him. So similarly, we are in this body because we desired to be in this body. We desired to have a particular mother, father type. We did something in our past life. Of course, you cannot make it that simplified, but ultimately, we do things because of our desire, and then we get a body. So we want to be Indian, we want to be female, we want to be male, we want to be white, we want to be black, we want to be African, we want to be Muslim, Indonesian. And we go through life meditating like that, and then the next life we wake up, and we don't know why we're born with Japanese eyes, but there we are in Japan. It's because of every desire, ultimately.
How quick can we change our desire?
Not very, very quickly, but we have to practice.
Yeah.
We have to constantly, it's a constant practice. The Bhagavad-Gita is 18 chapters. And specifically, it's the condition of the living entity that we want things instantaneously, very, very quickly. But we have to labor hard and prove ourselves, become qualified, and then gradually we're changing our desire through that hard work. That's what's called the sacrifice. So it all depends on, basically, ultimately, the process of letting go of the attachment that we have to the senses. And we all have individual, specific, personal attachments. I have mine, you have yours, we all, and only you know what your specific individual attachments are, but they're with you there every day, every moment. As soon as you wake up in the morning, that attachment's there. And we go through life thinking about, yes, I'm going to do this today, And it happens throughout the day. You meet somebody, you get the kind of food, you go to the particular kind of place, you have the different kind of experiences based upon the particular attachment that are deeply embedded inside of us. And only I, as a person, know my particular attachment. And it's up to me to deal with that attachment. I can't ask you, Prabhu, can you help me with this attachment? Can you help me with this desire I have? General information of the functional processes, you can give me. But I have to do the work. Therefore, Prabhupada said, at the end, you have to fly your own plane. All of us, we have to be qualified at the very end to develop a different kind of desire. So that's back to the triangle. Remember the three modes? We're looking down, Paramatma, and there's a triangle and the smoke's coming out this wheel, this chakra. That's why it's important for us to practice. And we remember back in the prayers where Lord Brahma is speaking. Lord Brahma says that actually all of us, all living entities, are born out of passion. All of us are born out of the passion of our mothers and fathers, where they were cats, dogs, or mosquitoes. There was passion, and we were created through that. Brahma says, now it's time to bring the living entity up to the mode of goodness. Then you can offer prayers in glorification of the Supreme Lord in the mode of goodness. So part of our job is to become situated in the mode of goodness. And then in the mode of goodness we become, that is the state. It's a boost up from that state where we can become in pure goodness, where there's no desire at all. That's called pure goodness. But still in the mode of goodness, there's still desire. But gradually we become elevated and trained that we start to even realize, so even if we become in the mode of goodness and we take birth as a devata, a demigod, after a while we still see that, oh yes, I'm a demigod and my life is very, very wonderful. I'm the president of Indraloka. But still we see there's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of unhappiness, a lot of misery. We read about Indra. He's always has to go to war all the time and call all the demigods, and they all have to put on their uniforms and their armor and get in line and march throughout the sky and go to war and fight the asuras and the rakshasas. So even there, even though they have, even after the war, they can go home and live in a beautiful, gorgeous palace, have a beautiful family, and have some, different cities and powers where they can maybe pluck an apple from a very tasty, sweet apple that tastes 1,000 different ways and enjoy music for 1,000 years. Still, they have to get up the next morning and go back to war. Or they have to worry about the asuras coming and snatching the babies and eating the babies up. The monsters come. So even in the mode of goodness, there's some problems and suffering. But it's from that level of goodness that we become stable, where that's the doorway between the other states of passion and ignorance. What is called the pylon, or the passageway, is in the middle, which is called goodness. And that is, from that we march on forward. Because in the mode of goodness, in Sutta goodness, pure goodness, the Guru is there in front as our leader and leading us on with the torchlight of knowledge onto the vision and awareness of Bhagavan. So this is the yogi and Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada explains here. And if we study very carefully, that's why really it doesn't really suffice us that much to read Prabhupada's books. But we have to study the books very, very carefully. Because if you read the books, you'll think, oh yeah, he said that in the previous page. He said that in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But when you study and you put it all together, you start to see that there's a big, big picture that's being drawn. Even though it appears to be the same thing over and over again, it all builds up, one block upon another, to a higher vision of the personality of Godhead, which ultimately leads us to the point where we can actually take direct instructions from the Lord. Like we look at our Arjuna here. He's receiving instructions from the Supreme Personality of God. And Arjuna was such a close friend to Krishna that Krishna was his direct chariot driver. And do you know who is the first person in the Srimad Bhagavatam to offer prayers to Krishna? I think everyone knows. It's like a rhetorical question. But who is the first person to offer prayers to Krishna? Huh? Brahma? Anybody else? Kunti Devi? Vyasadeva? The first person to offer the in-depth prayers to Krishna is Arjuna. Look at the chapter where it says the son of Drona. When Ashvatthama releases the weapon and Arjuna, first Arjuna is chasing Ashvatthama. And then Ashvatthama's horses get tired. And then Ashvatthama pulls out his final weapon and throws it, the Brahmastra. At that time Arjuna, he goes to Krishna. And he starts to glorify Krishna and offer praise to Krishna. So Arjuna is the first person, the friend of Krishna here in the Bhagavad-Gita is given the first place of prayers in the Bhagavad-Gita. I'd like to conclude with that point that we should not minimize the point of knowing who Krishna is as our friend. So therefore Krishna is called Sarva Mitra. Here we say Sarva Bhutastam. So Krishna is called Sarva Mitra. He's the friend of everyone. And Arjuna exemplifies this friendship by not only having a place in this entire book, but having the beginning place of glorification of the Lord in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Our whole religion actually, we practice what is called the theology of glorification. There's different kinds of theological processes. And this is called the theology of glorification, where we are coming to learn to especially use this tongue to offer glory and praise to the Supreme Lord. And Arjuna shows us of his connection to Krishna and his friendship and how the value of that is by him having the first honor of offering praise to the Lord in the Bhagavad-Gita. Anybody have any feedback or input on the ideas today?
Just to this very point, can you say the first verse in Bhagavatam is a prayer spoken by Vyasadeva, where he says about Krishna's birth and his omnipotent.
Yeah. It begins with Vyasadeva's prayer, exactly, as the compiler. What I'm referring to as the storyline, following the storyline of the Bhagavad-Gita. Outside of the acknowledgement of the invocation, that is the first person in the storyline. A lot of people think it's Kunti who has the first honor, but actually it's Arjuna as the first honor. But yes, the invocation.
You spoke about the mode of goodness.
Yeah.
So a person in a mode of goodness can be peaceful anywhere, right? That's like you can be in a very passionate place and still not be influenced.
Yes, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge because that goodness is assaulted, and so therefore Krishna says sometimes the passion and the ignorance will overwhelm it and overtake it.
But can it sometimes be that passion especially can be an instrument that helps against danger? Here in the down there's all the cows or cars driving on the road and we're walking in the streets.
Yeah.
So sometimes they almost touch us.
Yeah.
So there we have to sort of like be aware not to be hit by the cars.
I can elaborate on that later on because we have about 2 minutes left. Or next time I'll talk about that because that's particularly a concept. If you understand the mechanical structure of yoga, that understanding is dealing with, they deal with that concept very important because they are controlling, practicing the control of the different branches of the vagus nerve. The 10th cranial nerve is called the vagus nerve or the wandering nerve, and it wanders throughout the body, and the vagus nerve controls what is called the fight or flight reflex. And that vagus nerve has that function of alerting us through the what is called the autonomic nervous system of danger. So that is that mode of passion. But it also, the vagus nerve, because it's situated in it flows, it's called the wanderer, it means it's moving throughout the body. It's called a cranial nerve, which means it comes out of the brain. We have 12 cranial nerves, and the vagus nerve is the only one that leaves the brain and goes down into the body. So through practice of pranayama and what do you call it, asana, through nolis and things like that, they put pressure and control the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve runs in front of the spine, in back of the spine, and in the middle of the spine. And each one of those branches has a particular function. One of those is controlling the alert mechanism of the body. So yes, you're right. Srimad Bhagavad-Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.